الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So in continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafidh ibn Ḥajar al-ʿAsqalānī rahimahullah, where we're discussing Kitab al-Taharah, and we're discussing the first bab, which is discussing concerning matters pertaining to al-Miyah. So different type of water and the different rulings that applies to them. So we'll be discussing another of those hadiths that relates to this particular topic, and then, as is our normal practice, that we'll go through the hadith by way of a takhrij, and also discussing the masahil that is relevant to this particular chapter. So I'll read the hadith, and then we go through the discussion relating to the hadith, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Hadith number 8, page number 21. Narrated Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "The purification of the utensil belonging to one of you, if it has been licked by a dog, is to wash it 7 times, using surface soil for the first cleaning." Muslim reported it. Another narration of Muslim has, he should pour out the contents. At Tirmidhi has, using surface soil for the first and the last cleaning.
So the author rahimahullah, Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, as we know, is a mukhtasar that regarding the hadith that he mentioned. So he mentioned regarding another discussion regarding concerning that matters relating to al-kalb, which is a dog. So he discussed concerning the hadith, or mentioned the hadith of the Sahabi Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله 7 مرات أولاهن بالتراب أخرجه مسلم وفي لفظ فيرقه وللترمذي أخراهن أو أولاهن بالتراب. So that's concerning hadith that he mentioned regarding concerning discussing concerning matters pertaining to al-Miyah. So we discussed the hadith that is mentioned here that relates to concerning that al-kalb, a dog, if it was to lick in one of your vessels that contain water, concerning what to be done in this regarding this matter. So as for the hadith that regarding takhrij of the hadith, then regarding concerning the hadith that he mentioned, that the hadith, it consists of 2 parts. So regarding concerning who have those who have collected this hadith that he mentioned concerning that, one, Imam Muslim, and second, at-Tirmidhi. So as for the hadith that is mentioned by Imam Muslim rahimahullah, so as for that hadith, it is mentioned, it can found concerning other collectors of hadith by way of takhrij, that we have concerning Imam Shafi fi Musnadi. So Imam Shafi rahimahullah, that a book that is called al-Musnad Imam Shafi had been put together. Not that work of the Musnad of Imam Shafi was written by him, but others who put this collection together regarding a hadith that Imam Shafi rahimahullah have narrated. Also others who have narrated hadith concerning of the more concerning Ahmad in his Musnad, Imam Muslim in his Sahih, as mentioned here by Imam as mentioned here. Also others, Abu Dawood in his Sunan, also the hadith in the An-Nasa'i in his Sunan al-Kubra, and also al-Sughra. So An-Nasa'i, that also from Kutub al-Sitta, have also narrated this hadith from both his 2 collection. Al-Kubra is larger collection, and also al-Sughra, that is one of Kutub al-Sitta. Others also have narrated the hadith of Abu Awana. Also we have At-Tahawi in his Ḥajar Ma'ani al-Athar, also At-Tabarani in his Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat, Ibn Khuzaymah in his Sahih, also Ibn Ibn in his Sahih, Daraqutni, Hakim, and also Al-Bayhaqi, and others. So these are of the ulama, of those who have collected this hadith. So in quick concern we mention Imam Shafi in his Musnad, we have Ahmed in his Musnad, Imam Muslim, Imam Abu Dawood, and Nasahi in his Al-Kubra was Sughra. Also Abu Awana, also we have Tahawi, also we have Tabarani in Mu'jam al-Awsat, also we have Ibn Khuzaymah in his Sahih, we have Hakim, we have Ibn Hibban and Daraqutni, and some of those who have narrated this or collected this particular hadith. So this hadith is found in many collections of. So the hadith is mentioned as concerned the hadith that is mentioned here, that goes back to Imam Muslim rahimahullah. Also, I mentioned the second part of the hadith. They mentioned وفي لفظ له يعني that there's also a part of the narration of the hadith that goes back to Imam Muslim, that after narration mention فَلْيُرِقْهُ, they mention فَلْيُرِقْهُ, that the water to be thrown out. So he mentioned that Imam Muslim rahimullah also mentioned as a portion of the hadith that the hadith is to be thrown out. Then it mentioned Tirmidhi and also At-Tirmidhi rahimullah, that also he mentioned a third part of the hadith that mentioned regarding that the person should wash it with dirt either in the first or the last, where it mentioned أو أخراهن أو أولاهن. So that the narrator is somewhat in doubt, is it the first or the last that it should be washed with a dirt. So that's concerning the hadith. As for a further discussion regarding this hadith, that you find that there's a discussion regarding certain aspect or certain parts of certain wording of this hadith. So regarding the hadith, that there are certain wordings of this hadith that is on the discussion by the ulama of hadith regarding what is mentioned here. So regarding concerning the narration I mentioned of Imam Muslim rahimahullah, start concerning Imam Muslim rahimahullah, that he narrate this hadith with various wordings. So I mentioned tuhur ina ahadukum, that is with Imam Muslim. Then I mentioned إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله سبع مرات. As for that portion of the hadith, also it is narrated by Imam Bukhari. So the portion of the hadith I mentioned, إذا ولغ فيه الكلب, that if a dog was to lick into that vessel, and يغسله سبع مرات, that is mentioned also by Imam al-Bukhari. So Imam Bukhari also, they said the asl, this hadith also, that a portion of this hadith also is shared by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. As for the part that I mentioned, وَأُولَهُنَّ بِالتَّرَابِ, then that is mentioned by Imam Muslim. There's some discussion regarding بِالتَّرَابِ, but you find that there's many narration, some narration, even with Imam Muslim, mention it being washed with turab, with dirt, and other narration does not mention turab. So what you find, some narration mentioned that this washing should include dirt, and some narration does not include dirt. But the narration that Imam Muslim rahimahullah, that he mentioned this one including dirt, that one is more per se that it specifies what additional washing and what should be used for this additional washing, which is at-turab. So that's why Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, he mentioned this, because it stipulates, this narration mentioned also that this washing should be done 7 times, and also it should be washed also with dirt. So he mentioned this one is more detail. So that's concerning that part of the hadith. That the second part he mentioned concerning وَفِي لَفْ in the Muslim فَلْيَرِقْهُ, that he mentioned فَلْيَرِقْهُ, that it should be thrown out. As for this part of the hadith, you can say not in your books, you can put a circle around it, or that part of the hadith that you find that is a discussion between the ulama regarding its authenticity. So even though it is mentioned in Sahih Muslim, so if we go back to Imam Muslim rahimahullah in his Sahih, when he mentioned that part, he mentioned separate. It mentioned that word separately. So if you go back to the book of Imam Muslim rahimahullah in his Sahih, that when he mentioned these ahadith, that when he mentioned a narration, so he mentioned the hadith of Abu Hurairah anhu, إذا ولغ الكلب في إناء أحدكم فليرقه ثم يغسله 7 مرات. Then he mentioned, after they mentioned, قال حدثني محمد بن صباح قال حدثني إسماعيل بن زكريا عن عامش بهذا إسناد, with the same isnad they mentioned مثله, similar to it. Then he mentioned ولم يذكر, that it was not mentioned regarding in this other narration فليرقه. So some narration mention it, some narrators mention this word, it should be thrown out, and others did not. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he kind of somewhat wish to highlight this and brought this to our attention, that the portion or this wording in the hadith, this word in the hadith, that it should be thrown out. He mentioned lam yadhkur, that some of the narrators did not mention this. So that became that. So because of this, become a discussion between the ulama of hadith regarding, is this wording that Imam Muslim rahimahullah trying to indicate that this is something which is not a part of the hadith. So even though it is mentioned in some narration, where they mentioned that most did not narrate with this wording that it should be thrown out, and that they mentioned that the narrations that goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, so in this, they mentioned that the narration that goes back to the Prophet ﷺ about the water should be thrown out, that's mentioned in Sahih Muslim, that they find that even Imam Muslim, that highlight that there's some discussion regarding that, and that some narrators, which are majority of the narrators, did not mention it. So majority of the narrations that they did not mention regarding it to be thrown out. And based upon this, you have a discussion between the ulama regarding concerning it being a part of the hadith. That goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. So it being thrown out, that wording to be thrown out, is this something also mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ when he mentioned this hadith? So you find that the ulama have criticized this, and they mentioned regarding concerning that matter that you'll find concerning that, as mentioned by that, it is stated, lakin, concerning Ibn Adi mentioned, lakin fi raf nazar, regarding it being raised or going back, reference back to the Prophet ﷺ as being a part of his statement that it should be thrown out, that the ulama have mentioned concerning it, was sahih annahu mawquf. That wording does not go back to the Prophet ﷺ, rather is a statement of Abu Hurairah. So that wording that it should be thrown out, it is not correct, it is not authentic, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, but rather it is something which is a statement of Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu, not per se the Prophet ﷺ. So the ulama have mentioned it is something which is, it is mentioned, it is shadh. It is a statement to this shadh. So you find Daraqutni, Ibn Manda, and the likes that they have mentioned at that part of the hadith. It is something which is, as they mentioned, so Ibn Abdul Barr, of those who have criticized first Nasa'i, have highlighted that wording, it should be thrown out, that it is not authentic, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, where he mentioned, La alam ahad, and Nasa'i rahimahullah in his narration he mentioned, La alam ahad, I do not know of anyone, Taba Ali ibn Mushir, which is that narrator Ali ibn Mushir, that is the one who included, is the only one who mentioned that the water is to be thrown out. Ali ibn Mushir is the only one who said this. Everyone else that narrated the hadith did not mention this, except for one person. So based upon this, they kind of they raised this to a matter which is something which is said to be shadh. That shadh is when something is mentioned by someone, either is thiqah, that goes in contrary to what has been mentioned by many others, or something that one person thiqah, he said that that is the only one saying something that everyone else did not say. So they mentioned that this portion, that this, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, it is not authentic, it is not mahfuz, it is not valid, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, authentic, go back to the Prophet ﷺ, but rather it is something which go back to the Sahabi Abu Hurairah anhu, who mentioned this. So that's concerning. So all those who have highlighted this, we mentioned Nasa'i, also they mentioned Hamza, Kinani, also Ibn Abdul Barr, and also the likes of Ibn Manda, that they have all criticized that this is actually not a part of the statement of the Prophet ﷺ regarding it being thrown out. And Imam Muslim, when he mentioned this, and mentioned that it was not mentioned by others, he's highlighting that it is something that needs to be reviewed, and that there's a problem with that wording. That's concerning that matter. Then I mentioned regarding Tirmidhi, then I mentioned that ukhrahunna or awlahunna bit-turab. So at-Tirmidhi, which is the third part of the hadith that they mentioned, that at-Tirmidhi in his narration, that he mentioned that that the washing of 7 times, that once the first should be done with turab, or the last should be done with turab. Also with this concern, so that the narrator had a doubt between the narrator. So from this they mention that, from looking at the hadith and studying the hadith, that they have concluded that most of the narrators who mentioned this hadith, that they were somewhat mentioned in a very convincing way, that regarding concerning that, what is correct is regarding ulahunna bit-turab. So most of the narrators, they only state that it to be washed once, first with turab, and not that they didn't mention regarding the last, include the last. So the one which is confirmed by most of the narrators with certainty is that it is to be washed with the first wash, not with the last. So the first with turab, that's the more correct wording of the hadith. As for the one concerning the last, that one is not authentic. So that's concerning the hadith regarding that matter. So regarding the hadith, that as we highlight concerning that, we have mentioned that those who have narrated the hadith by way of the different books that have collected the hadith, there are many, but also there's some discussion regarding this hadith. So I mentioned that Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he mentioned in his Sahih, and as the ulama have clarified concerning that regarding criticizing this hadith based upon that particular wording, Imam Muslim himself, rahimahullah, even I like that there's an issue regarding this wording. So even himself in his Sahih, that he have kind of somewhat mentioned or give us some indication that there's some difference or some issues, some discussion regarding that additional wording that is to be thrown out. So that's concerned that matter, and we have mentioned concerned the aqwal of the ulama that the hadith is authentic, but the hadith which is authentic is wording we go that tuhur ina ahadukum idha walaga fihi al-kalb an yaghsilhu sab'a marrat ulahunna bit-turab, as the narration of Imam Muslim. As for the wording, it should be thrown out. فَلْيَرِقْهُ, that is not authentic. Going back to the Prophet ﷺ, that's a statement of Abu Hurairah. And also regarding concerning the doubt that is mentioned in the narration of At-Tirmidhi regarding is the first or the last, that it should be washed with turab. Then the correct wording is the wording of that mentioned by Imam Muslim. It is the first. The first one is to be with turab, as mentioned by those authentic narration. So before we go to, so that's concerning certain things that I mentioned. As for the Abu Hurairah anhu, that we had mentioned regarding matters about him previously. So need not to repeat again regarding some of the matters pertaining to Abu Hurairah. The next matter that we'll go to regarding this particular hadith is kind of somewhat draw some comparison regarding some of those books that have did some work regarding Bulugh al-Maram. So those books of tahqiq, those who have edited the book and did some checking of the book of Bulugh al-Maram by Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, which is the text itself. With their footnotes, we see concerning what have been mentioned regarding to see what have been stated or what benefits we can take from these different ta'liqat, these footnotes that have been mentioned by different of the Mashaykh who have checked the book of Bulugh al-Maram. So as we in this, we just mentioned as for the hadith that they mention Akhraju Imam Muslim, as we mentioned concerning hadith Tuhur ina wa'ahtukum, that the hadith, as for this first checking by Sheikh Samir, that Sheikh Samir rahimahullah mentioned regarding his checking, he mentioned that the hadith Akhraj Imam Muslim, he put number 5 notes, he mentioned the place of the hadith in the Sahih Muslim regarding the number. Then he mentioned وَفِي لَفْ lahu, as for the wording that is with Imam Muslim, then he mentioned فَلْيَرِقْهُ, that he mentioned, as he mentioned number 1, he mentioned Muslim, he put also the number where it can be found inside Muslim. Then he mentioned concerning the third part, which regarding At-Tirmidhi, mentioned that أُخْرَهُنَّ أَوْ أُولَهُنَّ بِالتُّرَابِ. He mentioned again regarding As-Sunan At-Tirmidhi, he mentioned the number. وَالرَّاجِعُ الرِّوَايَةُ أُولَهُنَّ. They mentioned that what is the correct, the more valid wording is that أُولَهُنَّ is the first. كما في الرواية السابقة, as in the previous narration. وعنده زيادة. Then he mentioned أخرى. Then he mentioned in the Tirmidhi, in his narration, there's also some additional wording. So also with Tirmidhi, in his narration, there's some additional wording mentioned, which he mentioned, وهي إذا ولغت فيه الحرة غسل مرة. So he mentioned additional wording that give a different ruling. We mentioned إذا ولغت فيه الحرة. That also this additional wording means that if a cat was to lick inside that that water, he mentioned غسل مرة, then it should be washed once. So the additional wording, the additional sentence in At-Tirmidhi that was not mentioned by Ibn Ḥajar, mentioned that regarding matters pertaining to a cat. If the cat was to lick in that vessel, then one should wash it once. Then I mentioned قلت الزيادة الصحيحة كما بينت ذلك في الناسخ الحديث والمنسوخ لابن شاهين. Then I mentioned that ziyada, according to him, it is authentic. But that is not mentioned by Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, tabaraka ta'ala. But that's in brief what has been mentioned by Sheikh Samir regarding is additional notes or is checking. Another in comparison, so with Ataf Samir, he can somewhat highlight concern that, you know, that somewhat indicate that the hadith is sahih without any criticism regarding the hadith. And now, as for the next one, which is by Sheikh Halak, in his checking of the hadith, he mentioned the hadith of Imam Muslim. Then he mentioned that the hadith, he mentioned Akhraj Imam Muslim, he mentioned Akhrajahu Muslim fi Sahihi, that the hadith is narrated by Imam Muslim, and he mentioned a number of hadith At-Tirmidhi, وقال hadith Hasan al-Sahih. So additional what he mentioned, that Imam At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, when he mentioned this hadith, at the end he gave the hukum. So At-Tirmidhi, when he mentioned this hadith, also he gave his own hukum upon the hadith. Where At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah mentioned, and he says, قال hadith hasanun sahih. So At-Tirmidhi all the hadith to be hasan sahih. Then he mentioned qultu. Then he mentioned, as for what is additional notes, akhrajahu, the hadith also is collected by Abu Dawood, Nasahi, Ibn Majah, Ibn Khuzaymah, Darakutni, Abu Awana, Tahawi, Abdul Razak, Ahmed ibn Abi Shayba, Khatib fi Tariq al-Baghdad, Tabarani fi Sahir. So he mentioned other, regarding concerns now, other additional sources where this hadith can be found. And we had mentioned some of those previously. So he mentioned the additional sources regarding books of hadith that this hadith can be found, and he gave a long list of the other sources that this hadith can be found. Then he mentioned qultu. Then again also he wished to add some additional notes. He mentioned qultu akhrajahu Bukhari. Also he mentioned this hadith is also narrated or collected by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. He mentioned the number of the hadith. He mentioned bilaf with the wording of Bukhari is as follows: إذا شرب الكلب في إناء أحدكم فيغسله سبعا. That Imam At-Tirmidhi Imam al-Bukhari, his wording is, where I mentioned that إذا ولغ Imam Bukhari إذا شرب, if the dog drinks. So Imam Bukhari said, if the dog drinks from any of your vessel, then you should wash it 7 times. You should wash it 7 times. That's the wording of Imam al-Bukhari. Then he mentioned some meaning of the word ولغ الكلب في إناء. He mentioned that. So that's concerning what is mentioned by halak. So halak, what we benefit from is that further concerning takhrij regarding different sources. Also he mentioned the hukum of Imam At-Tirmidhi on the hadith, and also he can somewhat draw a comparison regarding the wording of Imam Bukhari compared to that of the wording of Imam Bukhari regarding this particular hadith. Then we'll mention regarding a third of those who have done some work around the book of Bulugh al-Maram, and this is by Sheikh Mahir al-Fahl. Then he mentioned in his checking, he mentioned the hadith. Then he mentioned number 1, after mentioning akhrajahu al-Muslim, he mentioned sahih, akhrajahu al-Shafi'i fi Musnad, Abdul Razak, al-Humaydi, Ahmed, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nasahi, Ibn Khuzaymah, Darakutni, Hakim, wal-Bayhaqi. So also he gives some additional sources for this hadith. So he mentioned additional sources, which most of his sources coincide. Most of them, he mentioned some of that were of the sources previously mentioned by the checking of halak. So he mentioned not as many mentioned by halak, but he mentioned most of those that were mentioned with halak. Then he mentioned a second note, and he mentioned also he gives a comparison, which is the benefit of Sheikh Mahir in his checking, that at times he would compare, which we mentioned that the source of this book, the origin of this book of Imam Ibn Ḥajar, that he can somewhat condense a book of someone who preceded him. So the book concerning Ibn Daqiq al-Eid called al-Maram, that he made a summary of that book that is called Bulugh al-Maram. And also he made a comparison with that book, the original book of Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, and also he did another book that came also after, which is the book of al-Muharrar, to make a comparison between those two books regarding this particular hadith. Then he mentioned al-laf فَلْيَرِقْهُ shad wal-hadith sahih. Then also he mentioned that a ruling on the wording فَلْيَرِقْهُ, regarding it should be thrown out. Then he mentioned it's not that wording, it is shad. Then he went into discussing concerning that particular wording, that some narration mentioned فَلْيَرِقْهُ, and some mentioned فَلْيَرْحِقْهُ, يَرْحِقْهُ. So he mentioned different wordings that have similar meaning, but he mentioned that it is shadh. He mentioned that it is shadh. So they go into some discussion regarding why he came to that conclusion. Then the last of those, checking one of the Mashaykh from Al-Yaman, that he mentioned also his conclusion also, that regarding this particular hadith, that he mentioned the hadith of Sahih. He mentioned regarding the hadith according to Imam Muslim, he mentioned a number. Then he mentioned regarding concern that it be thrown out. He mentioned again also shadh, and then he kind of somewhat explain regarding the thing how he have come to that conclusion. So that's concerning the different checking of those books. So find that each one have different benefit. So some highlight regarding certain matters, regarding more in-depth study of the hadith and more precise study of the hadith, while some were very general regarding their study of the hadith, only mention regarding the source of the hadith and not those detail regarding some of the wordings that is discussed between the ulama of hadith. So that's concerning the hadith, as mentioned, the hadith that is mentioned here regarding what is said regarding to the hadith. Now go back now to, we go to inshallah ta'ala regarding concerning matters regarding the ahkam that can be taken from this hadith. So one, there's a discussion with the ulama concerning al-Hukm al-Kalb, concerning that al-Kalb, what's the hukum regarding, is it pure or impure? Concerning a dog, is a dog, what's the hukum regarding a dog? And regarding concerning lu'ab, regarding concerning that the dog and also is saliva, what's the hukum regarding the dog and its saliva? On this matter, there's a khilaf between the ulama. So on this matter, there's a khilaf between the ulama, and they have three opinions regarding the hukum regarding a dog and also is saliva. So the first of the views of the ulama on this matter, that regarding concern al-lu'ab, it is najas. Najasat al-lu'ab al-kalb. That they all consider, that first group of the ulama, the first view of the ulama is that the saliva of the dog, it is impure. It is impure. Wa taharat sha'ru. As for his hair on the body, outside that, they mention that is pure. So the lu'ab is saliva, according to them, this view, it is impure. As for his hair, the external bit, then it is pure for them. And that's the madhab of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, also Ahmed for riwayah, and also that's the view that is taken by Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So regarding concerning that, they all concerned that, that the saliva is impure, but as for the hair of the dog, it is pure according to them. Then and they have the Adillat, kind of somewhat used to come to a conclusion. And after that, they use this hadith. They mention that the hadith only stipulate that the impurity is regarding the saliva of the dog. It only mentioned concerning the saliva is impure. So that's of the thing that they use. That's the first view. The second view, that they take the position regarding the purity of the dog. They mention that najas al-lu'ab al-kalb, that the impurity of the saliva of the dog also is hair, also is impure. So both the saliva and the hair of the dog is impure. And with them also third, they add also his entire body. So the entire body of the dog with them is impure, his hair is impure, and also with them the saliva is impure. So everything about the dog with them is impure. And that's the madhab, that's the view taken by Imam al-Shafi. The more renowned view of Imam Ahmed is the view taken by Imam al-Awzā'i, Ishaq ibn Rahuya, Abu Ubaid, and a riwayah Imam Malik. So that's concerning. And al-San'ani rahimullah, al-San'ani in the book Subul Salam, with the explanation of the book Bulugh al-Maram, that he mentioned lil-jumhur min ahli al-ilm, that's the view taken by the jumhur of the ulama, that the majority of the ulama is of the view concerning that everything about the dog is impure. His saliva, his hair, and also his entire body. That's the view that he mentioned here. And also Shawkani also mentioned something similar. Something similar mentioned by Shawkani. So that's concerning that they mentioned that if the saliva is impure, which is inside the mouth, then the mouth is impure. And then that means concerned to know that everything regarding everything about the dog that internally is impure. So they mentioned that everything about him is impure. So they mentioned that because the saliva is impure, and then the mouth become impure, which is then everything else becomes impure that relates to the dog. So that's concerning that second view. Then the third view of the ulama on this matter is regarding Taharah al-lu'ab al-kalb. That I mentioned that the third view is that the lu'ab, the saliva of the dog, it is pure, his hair is pure, and his body is pure. So they mentioned that the dog is somewhat pure. So then the third view all concerning that all of the dog is pure regarding his saliva, also regarding concerning his hair, and also his entire body is pure. And that's the view that is taken by the madhab of Imam Malik, but is more renowned for of his view, That's the view taken by Dawood al-Zahiri, al-Zuhri, Sufyan al-Thawri, Ibn Mundhir, Ibn Abdul Barr, al-Bukhari, and a narration Imam Ahmed. So the third view, so those are the three views that are there regarding the dog. Is he pure or not pure? And his saliva pure? So you have those three aqwal between the ulama that have been mentioned regarding concerning the dog. So in a nutshell, regarding concerning that from the hadith and what is similar, that the first view seems to be the more correct view. The first view that lu'ab is impure, but as for his hair, it is pure. So the lu'ab, that's what is impure regarding the dog. But as for his entire body, as for the other things of his hair, then that is not impure. That is not impure. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. So that's concerning a brief summary regarding that particular matter, regarding concerning the hukum of the dog and his lu'ab. So the lu'ab is saliva, then that is impure. But as for the hair on his body, then there's no clear dalil that it is impure. But so that's concerning view. The second masala to be discussed regarding does this hukum regarding dog applies to all type of dog, whether those dogs are dogs that are trained dogs or untrained dogs, while dogs that are used for hunting. So concerning Islam, I've allowed regarding that dogs can be used for hunting, it can be used for guard dog, that even concerning that we have today that dogs are used regarding as guide. So regarding concerning those dogs that are trained for certain things, are they same as those dogs that are untrained, and wild dogs are all the same? Are the same hukum regarding them? Concerned to know that the same hukum applies to all. So the hukum that applies to all dogs are the same regarding concerning what we had mentioned before. So there's no difference regarding those dogs that we are allowed to make use of them and those dogs that we are not allowed. So all dogs, the rule that applies to one applies across the board to all dogs. What a dog is said to be, dog which is said to be of a dog, which is so that's concerned as we mentioned. So what a dog is one that is trained or untrained or is used for certain things that Islam allows, then all dogs, they fall into the same category. So you find a difference between the ulama, where Jumhur of the ulama that's mentioned that all dogs, the same ruling applies. That's a call of Jumhur of the ulama, that with all dogs, the same ruling applies. Imam Malik rahimahullah mentioned regarding concerning that dogs that are somewhat can be used, that Islam allows us to keep off those dogs. He mentioned the ruling is different. He mentioned that one doesn't have to wash them as one would do in ordinary dogs regarding washing of things that they touch. But the call of Jumhur is Sahih, and that's the view that is taken by Ibn Uthaymeen. So across the board, regarding all dogs, whether the ones that we can allow to use for certain things or not to be used, all dogs, the ruling is one regarding if their saliva touch anything, then it's to be washed, as mentioned in the hadith, and that to be discussed further. The third matter to be discussed concerning the washing of things licked by the dog is to be done 7 times, more or less. So regarding concerning the Jumhur of the ulama, so on this matter, regarding the things that are licked by the dog, is it to be washed 7 times? They mention, Jumhur of the ulama, they mention that washing it 7 times is wajib. So to wash, to cleanse of those things is to be done 7 times. To be washed 7 times, washed out 7 times. Regarding ina, which is something that, things regarding like our cups and utensils, those are the things that are cups and plates and pots. These are the things that are being discussed. So regarding concerning those things that are licked by the dog, then they should be washed 7 times. And Jumhur of the ulama, all that is to be done 7 times regarding ina, which concerning that, plates, cups, pots, utensils, these type of things. The second view is that the Ahnaf, they all concern the person that it's not compulsory to wash those things 7 times. So the oath is not compulsory to be washed 7 times. And they come to that conclusion, Ahnaf, we mentioned the hadith, that in the Daraqutni on Abu Hurairah anhu, that he mentioned that Marfu'un قال في كلب قال أنه يغسل 3 أو 5 أو 7. That's I mentioned a hadith in the Daraqutni, that give some mention that the saliva of the dogs, that it can be washed sab'an or khamsan or salatan, could be done 7, 5 or 3 times. But the hadith is daif. That hadith that gives that kind of somewhat a person of a leeway regarding he can do it less than 7, or he has a choice between 7, 5 or 3, that hadith is daif. So we'll go back to the asl, which is the hadith that is mentioned here. So that's concerning the qawl of Jumhur of the ulama, is that it to be washed 7 times according to the hadith that is mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. The next matter to be discussed regarding concerning the fourth matter regarding hukum tatrib, regarding the use of turab, the use of dirt. So the person regarding as a part of the washing, does the person need to use dirt or not? Jumhur of the ulama, ذهب جمهور أهل العلم إلى وجوب تتريب, that Jumhur of the ulama have taken a position a person must use turab. So in one of those washing, the person must use turab. And they use concern that this hadith that is mentioned, so they mentioned this particular hadith. As for the Ahnaf, that they have taken the view, the Ahnaf, that they have go against it, they mentioned, no, that it's not compulsory the person have to use turab. So they said, and they based their view based upon that all najasat can be washed without turab. So they said all najasat impurity can be cleansed without the use of turab. So they mentioned, so the same rule applies to even the saliva of the kalb. So that's concerning, which is a form of qiyas by them. So that's concerning the matter that is mentioned. And the Malikiyah, some of the Malikiyah also agree with the view of the Ahnaf. So some of the Malikiyah, that they agree with the view of the Ahnaf, where all that is not compulsory, that one must use turab. But the qawl al-Jumhur is based upon the hadith that is mentioned regarding of many of narration that mention turab. They mentioned that some narration mentioned the Ahnaf and the Malikiyah, that they mentioned that some narration mentioned turab, other narration does not mention the use of turab, dirt. So they mentioned there's ittirab, that is, they said, that there seems to be some form of confusion or difference in the hadith. But the ulama have clarified that some hadith did not, and some that are authentic did mention. So precedent is given to those hadith that did mention turab, dirt, as a part of the process of cleansing of that the saliva of the dog. The next matter, as we mentioned, hadith concerning al-mawqi tatrib, is that it to be done first. So in the first washing, which is more ideal, a person would include it in the washing, the first washing. So and then other thing else, we just clean the dirt and whatever is there. So ideally, for the person to do so in the first washing, as that's the more correct narration. That's the more correct narration. And now, rahimullah, can I somewhat take a view in the sense, but and dhakra khilaf al-riwayat, when after that, and now, rahimullah, after mentioning the khilaf regarding different narrations, some mention that it should be done once, some mention it to be done first, some mention to be last, and it seems to be differing. So I mentioned فيه دليل أن الترتيب بالأولى وبغيرها ليس على اشتراط. That I mentioned that so something it's not a conditional that a person have to do it in the first wash, but it's more proper to be done so. So it is more proper to be done so. It's not that a person must do so, but at least in one of the washing, cleansing of that item, it should be done with turab, but preferable to be done in the first. But if the person missed the first, then it can be done after. And Allahu Alam. As for the next matter regarding the ulama discuss, especially in contemporary times, هل يقوم صابون وأشنان مقام التراب? Can we replace turab with soap or with detergents, washing detergents? So instead of using turab, dirt, the person instead gonna use soap powder or liquid powder or washing detergent. Are those things can be used as a replacement for turab? The discussion between the ulama on that matter regarding, they mentioned that the hadith of the ulama are of the view regarding that the hadith stipulate turab, and by this one should use turab. So of the ulama mentioned certain matter of the Shafi'iyah, that they mentioned other detergents can be used, cleaning detergents can be used as the objective, the aim is tanzif, is to clean and to cleanse that thing. So they mentioned other things that can use as cleanser to clean the inner that the cooking those utensils, they mentioned, it can be used. And of the ulama who all concerned that, that it has to, the one is restricted to what is mentioned hadith, that it is restricted to what is mentioned in the hadith. So they mentioned, regarding concern, they mentioned because in the hadith it stipulates turab to be used, so the person should stick to what is mentioned in the hadith. That one should stick as the what is mentioned in the hadith regarding what to be used as a form of cleanser, regarding this way of cleaning of that vessel. You have other things that they discuss regarding concerning that. So those are those masail. You have other things that they mention. For example, if the dog was to lick in the vessel, and then he went back and licked in the same vessel a second time, or more than one dogs were drinking from the same vessel, does the person need to wash it for each dog separately, or once is enough for all the dogs that licked from that vessel? And the qawla concerns that once is sufficient for, regardless of the amount of dogs that lick from that vessel. So the person only need to wash it once, and that would suffice for whether the dog licked it more than once, did it twice, several times, or more than dogs licked from the same vessel. That once is sufficient. Once is sufficient, as mentioned by An-Nawawi rahimahullah. الذي صحه النووي concerning الصحيح لو ولغ الكلب مرة واحدة في إناء وأطال الوهول فيه. Then I mentioned that one washing is sufficient. One washing is sufficient, and that's the view taken by others of the ulama. So whether one or two or three dogs licked from the same vessel, one washing is sufficient for all the different dogs. Then we discussed concerning that water, as we discussed concerning that water that you lick from that vessel, that considered to be najas. If it's something that water that considered is that water and considered to be najas. So we discussed concerning that that the saliva of the dog is impure. So if it can somewhat change the color, the taste, or the smell, then it is najas. It becomes najas. So you have that discussion between the ulama regarding those who incline to God that the water become impure, and those who in that and others who mentioned that as it is not regarding that matter. So a discussion regarding the Abdul Maida that it is not najas. So al-Malikiyya ذهب إلى عدم النجاسة, and al-Shafi'i and Hanabila that it is najas. As the hadith mentioned, somebody mentioned, so that's the view of some of the ulama that it is najas, and Allahu Alam that seems akrab. So if anything, any changes occur regarding color, taste, or smell, then it becomes impure. So our next matter we discuss concerning, as we mentioned, regarding baqiyat al-ajza al-kalb. So regarding concern that the kalb, that as we discussed in the first, is everything about the dog pure or impure, or just is saliva. So as we had mentioned, the different aqwal of the ulama, the three views of the ulama, those are all that that is just is saliva is impure. As for is here, it is the saliva is impure, and is here it is pure. So with that matter concern the dog, concern the matter of the dog, concern that they have that discussion between the ulama on that matter. So if the dog was to touch a person, regarding the person was to pass by a dog, and can somewhat the person was to touch the dog, or the dog was to touch a person, whether his clothing or his body, directly his hand, then the person is not a need for the person to wash that part of the body that touched the dog, other than his mouth, that 7 times, or his clothing. So the person passed by a dog, the dog he brushed on the side of the dog, he touched the leg of the dog, he touched the top of the head of the dog, or pat the dog. The person doesn't need to wash his hand 7 times, and once with turab. So that only apply to the saliva. That ruling regarding 7 times with turab, with dirt, only applies regarding the saliva of the dog. So the person was to, so that's concerning that regarding only the saliva. Then the dog was to, the dog was to touch lick the person clothing. Then the person by washing it ordinarily, then that's sufficient. So the person washing it ordinarily wash the clothing, then that is sufficient. Also the person doesn't. So the rule that we mentioned is for ina, is regarding concerning the dog, regarding vessel, regarding cutleries, then it applies to those things. As for ordinary things regarding the dog licking those things or may touch, then the person will wash it, or we will ordinarily wash those those things. So washing a washing machine, in the wash tub, or whatever, then that is sufficient for washing that garment. As washing the inner, if the dog lick into it, is to be done immediately. The ulama mentioned it is mustahab. It's not necessarily the person has to do it immediate. So whenever it is washed, but when it is to be cleaned, then the person will wash it in that fashion as described in the hadith. So the person who the dog may have licked from is a plate that he wished to use. When he wished to use that plate, then it should be washed as described by the hadith. So also with this concerning al-khanzir, then al-khanzir also concerning khanzir, which is the swine, the pig, then also that this ruling applies to a dog in particular, not to that of a pig. So the rule that is being discussed here, that it does not, it is the hadith mention a swine, that it does not mention the pig, it mentioned the dog. So the rule that we are discussing is related to a dog, not to that of a pig. Not to that of a pig. So not to make that qiyas or analogy by passing the same judgment of that of a dog on that of a pig. So that's concerning that matter, and the pig will discuss that further regarding that matter. So you find some of the ulama that I mentioned the khanzir, that the hukum of the khanzir, that is similar to that of a dog. So some of the ulama, and that's the view concerning that, that is taken by some of the ulama, that the pig ruling, the same thing would apply to that of a dog. But the hadith first says, that that's not the case. So the reality, that's not the case regarding that matter. So that's not the case regarding that of a pig. And we'll discuss that further, and we'll discuss concerning that matter regarding those matters. So that inshallah ta'ala, regarding this matter, regarding this hadith, that somewhat went into some length regarding discussion. So as we mentioned regarding the hadith itself, regarding there's certain wording in the hadith, that there's some discussion between the ulama regarding its authenticity, which, and we discussed some of those wording regarding it being thrown out. Is it the first or the last? The correct wording is the first. It being thrown out is not authentic. Going back to the Prophet ﷺ, then we discussed concerning, as for now, the matter relating to the dog, as for the ruling that is appropriate. So the Muslim regarding concern a dog is not something, so just to conclude, so mentioned concerning the hadith, discussed concerning that the dog licking of something that is used as a container. As for matters regarding keeping of a dog, we have certain that the ulama and the hadith have mentioned, certain dogs can be used for certain things that they are trained. But a Muslim, as a general thing per se, having a dog as a pet. So having a dog as a pet inside the house, then that's something that is not to be done. A person can have a dog based upon their need and their circumstance as a guard dog, to guard. But as for the person having a dog as a pet that live in the house and run around freely inside the house as that of a normal pet, then that is not to be done. That is not to be done, to have a dog in that fashion as a pet, but having a dog as to guard the house, and the dog sleep outside in a restricted area, but not inside the house like a pet, then this is that's something that one should be mindful of. So with this, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end this hadith regarding the benefit can be taken. There's other things that can be said, but we limit it. We'll satisfy what we have mentioned. With that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.